Mistakes make songs better. Well, sometimes, yeah. Let's remember that music, after all, is an art form and it's not a science. And so I think there should be room for mistakes because no matter how deliberate, it lets you know that another human being has made it. And I think when it comes down to it, that human element is actually what we connect to most in music and all forms of art. Maybe come back to this in a few years where AI has taken over and it's making all of our art forms. But right now in 2023, this is where we're at. So today we're going to look through 4 different mistakes that I think actually add to the songs or music that they happen in. And I'll actually tell you about one mistake I made in my band's first album that is now probably my favourite part of that song. So first up is one that you might have heard before. It's what's known as the Cobain chord. And it's technically a mistake. Like, there's no way that Kurt Cobain meant to do this, but actually it really adds to the music in my opinion. It basically revolves around his favourite way to play chords, the power chord. Now, to show you the Cobain chord, I thought it'd be criminal not to have a go on Kieran, the singer and other guitarist in my band's Mustang. I know this thing has got the humbuckers and obviously Kurt Cobain's Mustangs didn't, but this thing sounds great and it was just fun to play. In terms of the Cobain chord as it's known, I think what's happening here is when most people play a power chord, they'll play it either the 1st and the 5th like this, or they might add the octave as well, with either the pinky finger or some people play it like that, I guess, but I play it like that. So I have the 1st, the 5th, and the octave. Whereas Kurt Cobain played by barring with his ring finger. So it would sound like this. But what would end up happening is you'd get this note here on the G string. Probably a bit muted. But when you play, say, the intro to Smells Like Teen Spirit, you'd get that sound. Whereas you wouldn't get that if you just had that muted. And now I don't know about you, but whenever I've played Teen Spirit, I've always felt like there was something missing, and I think it might be that. Now we can just add a little bit of distortion to this and hear how the intro sounds. Obviously, as it's Kurt Cobain and it's Nirvana, I'm going to use the bleach pedal. I'm only using the distortion side of it for this, but this thing sounds really cool. I tried to keep it as natural as possible there. I didn't want to over-exaggerate it because it would have sounded weird. And if you actually listen to the real song, you only notice those notes every now and then. But while it's subtle, I really do think adding that in gets you closer to the sound of Nirvana than if you just play it in a conventional way. The next mistake is from possibly one of my favourite bands of all time, Radiohead. And it's actually in probably their most famous song, even though they absolutely hate it. And actually, whilst I think it's a great track, I definitely don't think it's one of their best. You might have guessed it, it's Creep. Basically, when the song goes from the verse to the chorus, Jonny Greenwood plays 3 blasts of guitar noise right as that chorus starts to come in. And according to Wikipedia, which we all know we can trust, Jonny Greenwood said that he really didn't like how quiet the song felt, so he just hit his guitar really hard. But Ed O'Brien said it's the sound of Jonny trying to ruin the song. He really didn't like it the first few times they'd recorded it, and so wanted to just basically mess it up. But then they ended up liking it and keeping it in there. And then there's actually a bit from Tom York where he mentions the sound of those guitar stabs kind of sounded like the song was self-destructing, and actually it really linked in well with the lyrics. What I think Jonny Greenwood was doing to get that sound was a mute, but not a palm mute, because if you palm mute and make that sound, it won't quite ring out properly. It's like a bit dead. But if you go low down on the fretboard where there's no real harmonics, for example fret 1, and then just kind of rest your fingers on the frets and play, then it starts to sound like what Jonny Greenwood did. Kind of like this. If we add a fair amount of reverb to that distortion, but with quite a short decay, I think we get pretty close to what they were doing. I think Tom York was onto something there. It really does sound like it's like erupting and breaking, and it really links in with the lyrics. Also, when I was researching this, I found a lot of people saying that they'd heard Creep be played live, and those little bits sounded absolutely awful. Well, I was lucky enough to see them play Creep at Glastonbury 2017, and those stabs sounded epic. So, who knows? Next up, we're going to touch into the world of metal, and I don't really go there at all. However, as far as metal bands go, I think Metallica are an awesome band. In the Master of Puppets solo, there's actually a little point where Kirk Hammett's string comes off the fretboard, and it creates this like weird octave squeal. I'm not going to pretend I know how to play the Master of Puppets solo, but this is kind of how it sounds when the string comes off the fretboard. And with all that gain and stuff, it can sound pretty cool in between because it's almost like it's jumping up octaves. If you want to listen out for it in the song, it's actually at 5 minutes 49. I listened over and over when I was making this video, and it does actually sound really cool. Now actually, I made a similar mistake in my band October Drift's first album. The riff for my band song, Just Got Caught, basically moves up and down the A string with the D string open alongside it, and it sounds a bit like this. But what I did by accident is on that second chord, I hit the G string. But it ended up sounding like this. Like I said earlier, I know it's a Guitar Man thing, but that is genuinely one of my favourite parts of the song now. And actually, I use that little mistake live. Now, our fourth mistake isn't technically a guitar part, it's a bass part, but I think it deserves to be in here, because if anything, this one is the biggest feature. If you listen to the intro of this track, you'll notice that there's a couple of bass parts, and then the song actually drops in after. And if you listen out for it, it's actually just the wrong notes. There's basically an interview with the bassist, Josephine Wiggs, where she talks about how the band hadn't played together for a while because she'd been in England. And when they got back together at rehearsals, they went through their new song, Cannonball. And obviously the bass part's kind of unique, it's like this massive slide. And because she was meant to start the song, in isolation, she didn't even realise she was playing the wrong note. And obviously once the guitars came in, she then changed and corrected it. And she goes on to say that even though she knew it was the wrong key, for some reason muscle memory kicked in and she kept going to that wrong note. And the rest of the band found it hilarious and just decided that it sounded pretty cool making those couple of mistakes and then going into the proper key after. They said that it felt like it set up a certain expectation, and then that expectation changed when the song came in because it was a different key. And basically they decided that the best thing to do was to keep those dodgy notes in there. And you hear it in the song, for 2 rounds it does. And then when you actually hear the song drop, it then changes to. It's pretty cool. In my opinion, I totally agree. And actually, when I hear that little bass thing before the song comes in, it's so synonymous with that song that I think the first time I hear it, I'll instantly know that that song's about to play. Now, I just want to say that I think it's so important to learn basic fundamentals of your instrument and to understand what's going on and to try and minimize mistakes as much as possible, because there's nothing worse than a band that actually isn't tight. But I stand by that those little human elements where someone's maybe not quite in time at one point in the song, or something slightly out of tune somewhere but it sounds cool, and when you get it in tune it doesn't sound right, just leave it how it was. I've actually been reading Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, and there's plenty of little moments where he'll talk about when they tried to correct mistakes, songs actually sounded worse, and I think it must be to do with that human element in it. Anyway, it's that time again. If you've enjoyed this, let me know, and actually if there's any other mistakes in songs that you know of, drop that in the comment, because I was struggling to find more, but I know there is. And then watch this video here next, and until next time, keep on making noises.